Lieutenant Emily Chen stood at attention in the commander's office at Camp McCoy, a prisoner-of-war facility nestled in the hills outside San Francisco. Through the window, she could see the Pacific Ocean stretching toward the horizon. It was August 1945, and the war with Japan was entering its final, brutal stage. "You want me to do what, sir?" Emily asked, certain she had misheard. Colonel Robert Dawson leaned back in his chair, his expression a mixture of annoyance and amusement. "You heard me correctly, Lieutenant. We have 52 Japanese prisoners arriving tomorrow from the Pacific Theater. You'll be responsible for their orientation, daily management, and welfare." Emily had been at Camp McCoy for 6 months, working in communications and translation. At 29, she was one of only a handful of Chinese-American women officers in the Women's Army Corps. She had joined to fight against the Japanese Empire that had devastated her ancestral homeland, and she had fought hard against prejudice to prove herself worthy of her commission. "Sir, with respect, I've applied for transfer to intelligence work in the Pacific. My Japanese language skills are exactly why you're perfect for this assignment," Dawson interrupted. "We need someone who speaks Japanese to manage these prisoners. You're available and qualified, simple as that." Major Frank Harrison, standing beside Dawson's desk, smirked. He was a career officer who had made his feelings about women in the military abundantly clear. "Besides, Lieutenant, it's basically babysitting. Should be right in your comfort zone." Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "How many guards will be assigned, sir?" "Sergeant Miller will handle security with 4 men, but you'll be the primary administrator. You'll oversee their housing, work details, meals, and compliance with camp regulations." "I'll need resources, sir. Medical supplies, interpreters." "You'll make do with what we have," Dawson said dismissively. "These aren't German POWs, Lieutenant. These are Japs. They don't deserve the same considerations." Emily stiffened. "The Geneva Convention doesn't make distinctions based on race, sir." Harrison laughed outright. "The Geneva Convention, how noble. These people tortured and murdered our boys. They deserve a bullet, not 3 meals a day." "They're prisoners of war, sir, not animals." "That's debatable," Harrison muttered. Dawson waved his hand. "Enough. Lieutenant Chen, you have your orders. The prisoners arrive at 0800 tomorrow. Dismissed." As Emily saluted and turned to leave, she heard Harrison say quietly, "This should be entertaining. A Chinese woman managing Jap prisoners. What could possibly go wrong?" That evening, Emily sat in the officers' mess with her friend, Captain Dorothy Walsh, the only other woman officer on base who treated her as an equal. "They're setting you up," Dorothy said bluntly over weak coffee. "Dawson wants you to fail so he can prove women can't handle real responsibility." "I know," Emily said, "but I also know something they don't." "What's that?" "Those prisoners are human beings. Scared, far from home, probably expecting to be executed. If I treat them with basic dignity, I might actually get cooperation instead of resistance." Dorothy raised an eyebrow. "You're not going soft on the enemy, are you?" "I'm being smart. Fear creates defiance. Respect creates cooperation." Emily stirred her coffee. "My grandmother always said you catch more flies with honey than vinegar." "Your grandmother wasn't dealing with Japanese soldiers." "No, but she survived the occupation of Shanghai. She knew something about enemies and survival." The next morning, Emily stood outside the newly prepared barracks as military trucks rolled through the gates. Her heart pounded as she watched Japanese soldiers climb down from the trucks, tired, thin, and watching everything with wary, hostile eyes. They were younger than she expected. Some looked barely 18, others middle-aged. They wore remnants of Japanese military uniforms, and they stood in formation automatically, years of military discipline overriding their exhaustion. Sergeant Miller, a grizzled veteran with a deep tan and deeper prejudices, spat tobacco juice on the ground. "Damn Japs! Should have left them to rot on whatever island we found them on." "They're our responsibility now, Sergeant," Emily said firmly. Colonel Dawson arrived with Major Harrison and several other officers. Dawson addressed the prisoners in loud, slow English, as if volume would aid comprehension. "You are prisoners of the United States Army. You will obey all orders. You will work. You will cause no trouble. Any resistance will be met with severe punishment." The Japanese prisoners stared at him with blank, exhausted faces. Some swayed on their feet. Emily stepped forward and spoke in Japanese. My name is Lieutenant Chen. I will be overseeing your detention here. You will be treated according to international law. We will provide food, shelter, and medical care. We expect your cooperation." The effect was immediate. Every prisoner's eyes snapped to her face. Several looked shocked that an American officer and a woman spoke their language. An older prisoner, ramrod straight despite obvious exhaustion, stepped forward. "I am Sergeant Takeshi Yamamoto. These men are under my command." "Here there is no command structure among prisoners," Emily said in Japanese. "But I will work with you to ensure everyone's needs are met. Please follow me to your barracks." As she led the group inside, she heard Harrison laugh behind her. "This is going to be a disaster. A woman, and Chinese at that, managing Jap prisoners. Give it a week before one of them tries to kill her." The barracks were clean but sparse, rows of bunks, a stove, tables, and benches. The prisoners filed in silently, moving with the automatic precision of trained soldiers. Yamamoto remained at attention. "What are our work assignments?" "We'll discuss that tomorrow. Today you'll be processed, examined by our medical staff, and given time to rest. Dinner will be served at 1800 hours. A young prisoner, barely more than a boy, spoke up nervously. "What kind of food?" Emily looked at him. He was painfully thin, his uniform hanging off his frame. "Rice, vegetables, and meat." The prisoners exchanged glances. One of them, a man in his 30s with a scarred face, said quietly in Japanese, "She lies. They will starve us, torture us. That is what we were told to expect." "I don't lie," Emily said, looking directly at him. "You'll see for yourselves." Yamamoto's eyes narrowed. "You speak our language very well. Where did you learn?" "University, and from Japanese neighbors before the war." "You are Chinese," he said flatly. It wasn't a question. "Chinese-American," Emily corrected. "My grandparents came from Shanghai. I was born in San Francisco." Another prisoner spat on the floor. "Chinese, our enemies even among the Americans." Emily felt anger flash through her, but she kept her voice calm. "Yes, I'm Chinese. And yes, Japanese forces invaded my ancestral homeland and killed millions of Chinese people. But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to do my job according to American law and values. If you cooperate, you'll be treated fairly. If you cause trouble, you'll face consequences. It's that simple." Yamamoto studied her for a long moment. "We will cooperate. We have no choice." "You always have a choice, Sergeant Yamamoto. You can choose dignity even in captivity." As Emily left the barracks, Sergeant Miller fell into step beside her. "You handled that pretty good, ma'am, but don't trust them. Japs are sneaky. They'll smile at you and stab you in the back first chance they get." "Have you ever actually spoken to a Japanese person, Sergeant?" Miller looked surprised. "Well, no, ma'am, but I seen what they did in the Pacific. That tells me everything I need to know." Emily stopped and faced him. "What you saw was war, the worst of humanity. These men are prisoners now. They're defeated and scared. If we treat them like animals, they'll act like animals. If we treat them like human beings, we might get human behavior in return." "That's mighty idealistic, ma'am." "It's practical, Sergeant. I need your help to make this work. Can I count on you to follow orders and treat these prisoners according to regulations?" Miller shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Yes, ma'am, but if any of them tries anything." "Then you respond appropriately, but not before." That evening, Emily reviewed the medical reports. The prisoners were suffering from malnutrition, parasites, untreated wounds, and exhaustion. Several had tropical diseases. One young prisoner had a badly infected leg wound that the camp doctor said might require amputation. Emily spent hours requisitioning medical supplies, arranging treatment schedules, and planning meals that would help restore the prisoner's health. She knew she was going above and beyond what was required. She also knew that Dawson and Harrison were watching, waiting for her to fail. But as she worked late into the night, Emily thought about her grandmother's stories of surviving the Japanese occupation. Her grandmother had suffered terribly, lost family members, endured horrors that still gave her nightmares. Yet her grandmother had also said something Emily never forgot. "The soldiers who hurt us were following orders from evil men. Some of them were also victims, forced to do terrible things. Hate the evil, Emily, but remember that even enemies are human beings. That is how you keep your own humanity." Emily looked out at the barracks where 52 Japanese prisoners slept, probably expecting torture or execution. She thought about the young boy who asked about food, the scared men who expected starvation. And she made a decision. She would treat these prisoners with dignity. She would show them what American values really meant, not because they deserved it, but because she did, because that was who she was. The first crisis came on the second day. Emily arrived at the barracks for morning roll call to find Sergeant Yamamoto standing over the young prisoner with the infected leg. The boy, his name was Private Kenji Sato, was burning with fever, delirious, and crying out in pain. The doctor saw him yesterday, Emily said in Japanese, kneeling beside the bunk. The infection is serious. He needs surgery. He will not survive surgery in his condition, Yamamoto said flatly. He is dying. Not if I can help it. Emily stood and turned to Sergeant Miller. Get the camp doctor now. Tell him it's an emergency. Miller hesitated. Ma'am, Major Harrison said we shouldn't waste medical resources on. I don't care what Major Harrison said. This prisoner is our responsibility. Get the doctor. Miller ran. Emily sat beside Kenji, placing a cool cloth on his forehead. The other prisoners watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. Why do you care if he dies? Asked the scarred prisoner, the one who had accused her of lying. His name, she had learned, was Corporal Hiro Tanaka. Because he's a human being. Because he's 19 years old. Because letting him die when I can help would be wrong. We are your enemies. The war made us enemies. It doesn't mean I have to hate you. Tanaka stared at her with something like confusion. The camp doctor arrived, Captain Peterson, a weary man in his 50s who had seen too much death in this war. He examined Kenji and shook his head. The infection is severe. He needs antibiotics, fluids, and surgery to clean the wound. Even then, his chances aren't good. Then let's give him the best chance we can, Emily said. Peterson looked at her steadily. You know there are American boys in hospitals who need those antibiotics. Some people would say they deserve them more than enemy prisoners. Some people would be wrong. We follow the Geneva Convention, Doctor. These men are entitled to medical care. You're going to make enemies with that attitude, Lieutenant. I already have enemies, Doctor. At least this way I can sleep at night. Kenji was transferred to the camp infirmary. Over the next 3 days, Emily spent every spare moment checking on him. She also continued organizing the prisoners' daily routines, trying to create structure and purpose. But the situation was tense. The prisoners were hostile and suspicious. They expected cruelty and couldn't understand why Emily treated them fairly. This made them more guarded, not less. Meanwhile, Major Harrison was actively undermining her work. He cut her supply requisitions, delayed medical approvals, and spread rumors that she was too sympathetic to the enemy. On the 4th day, Colonel Dawson called her to his office. Lieutenant Chen, I've received complaints about your management of the prisoners. What kind of complaints, sir? That you're spending too many resources on their comfort, that you're being too lenient, that you're emotionally compromised because of your personal feelings about the Japanese. Emily felt her temper rise but controlled it. Sir, I'm following Geneva Convention protocols exactly. The prisoners are receiving the minimum required care, nothing more. The minimum? Harrison interrupted. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed. You spent half our monthly medical budget on one dying Jap private. I spent necessary medical supplies on a prisoner with a life-threatening infection. That's my job, sir. Your job is to keep them contained and working, not to play nurse. My job is to manage them according to military regulations and international law. Dawson held up his hand. Enough, Lieutenant Chen, I'm going to be direct. You're on thin ice. I gave you this assignment to see if you could handle real responsibility. So far, I'm not impressed. Sir, the prisoners have been cooperative. There have been no incidents. They're following all camp rules. Because they're planning something, Harrison interjected. Japs are sneaky. They're acting obedient while they plot, and you're too naive to see it. Or maybe they're acting obedient because they're being treated fairly, Emily shot back. That's exactly the kind of emotional, feminine thinking that doesn't work in military operations, Harrison said with contempt. Emily turned to face him directly. With respect, sir, there's nothing feminine about following regulations, and there's nothing weak about treating prisoners humanely. In fact, it takes more strength to show restraint than to show cruelty. Harrison's face reddened. You're out of line, Lieutenant. I'm stating facts, sir. Dawson stood up. That's enough. Lieutenant Chen, you have 1 week to show measurable results. I want those prisoners productive and useful, or I'm reassigning you to typing reports. Dismissed. As Emily left, she heard Harrison say, "Told you women couldn't handle this. Too soft, too emotional." That evening, Emily sat in her small office, feeling the weight of everything crushing down on her. She had worked so hard, followed every rule, tried to do the right thing, and it wasn't enough. There was a knock on her door. Sergeant Miller stuck his head in. "Ma'am, you got a minute." "Come in, Sergeant." Miller entered, looking uncomfortable. "I just wanted to say, what you did for that young prisoner, Kenji, that took guts, and the doc says he's going to make it. The infection's clearing up." Emily felt a wave of relief. That's good news. "Yeah, and I wanted to say something else." Miller shifted his weight. "I've been in the Army 20 years, seen a lot of officers come and go. Most of them talk about duty and honor, but when it comes down to it, they do what's easiest or what looks best for their careers." He met her eyes. "You're different. You do what's right even when it's hard, even when it costs you. That's real leadership, ma'am." "Thank you, Sergeant. That means a lot." "There's something else. I've been talking to the prisoners some. Not much, since I don't speak Japanese, but gestures and such. They're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Monsters, I guess, but they're just men, scared men, young men. Some of them got photos of their families. One of them showed me a picture of his little girl." Miller looked troubled. "I've been hatting them for so long, ma'am. It's easier when you don't see them as people." "I know, Sergeant, but we have to see them as people. That's what separates us from the enemy." After Miller left, Emily made a decision. She had 1 week to show results. Fine. She would show Dawson and Harrison results they couldn't ignore. But she would do it her way. The next morning, Emily called Sergeant Yamamoto to her office. "I need your help," she said in Japanese. Yamamoto's expression remained neutral. "What kind of help?" "I need these men productive. The command wants to see results. I'm going to arrange work details, farming, maintenance, construction. But I want it organized by you with your input. I want the men to feel like they have some control, some dignity." "Why would you give us that?" "Because people work better when they're treated with respect, and because it's right." Yamamoto studied her for a long moment. "You are very different from what we were told American officers would be like." "What were you told?" "That Americans are cruel, barbaric, that they torture prisoners, that death is preferable to capture." He paused. "Everything we were told was a lie." "Not everything," Emily said quietly. "Some American soldiers have done terrible things, just as some Japanese soldiers have. War brings out the worst in people, but it can also bring out the best." "What is it you really want, Lieutenant Chen?" "I want peace. I want this war to end. I want to go home and never see another person suffer." She met his eyes. "But since I can't have that yet, I want to make this place bearable for everyone. Will you help me?" Yamamoto was silent for a long time. Then he bowed slightly. "I will help you." Over the next few days, Emily and Yamamoto organized the prisoners into work crews. Some tended the camp's vegetable gardens. Others did maintenance and repairs. A few with education helped in the camp administrative offices, translating documents. But Emily also implemented her boldest idea yet. She went into San Francisco on her day off and spent her own money at several stores. She bought ground beef, potatoes, buns, ketchup, and cases of Coca-Cola. She also bought a volleyball net and ball, some playing cards, and writing paper. Captain Dorothy Walsh went with her and watched with growing amazement as Emily loaded up supplies. "What are you planning?" Dorothy asked. "I'm planning to show those men something they've never seen before, regular American life. Not propaganda, not cruelty, just normalcy. By giving them hamburgers and Coca-Cola and volleyball and the chance to write letters home." Emily smiled. "I'm going to give them a 4th of July celebration. Well, a late one since the 4th already passed." "Emily, that's crazy. Dawson will lose his mind." "Dawson gave me 1 week to show results. I'll show him cooperation, productivity, and proof that treating prisoners well actually works better than treating them badly." "Or you'll get court-martialed for fraternization." "Maybe, but I'm going to try anyway." The next Saturday afternoon, Emily had the camp kitchen help her cook. She made hamburgers, dozens of them, with cheese, lettuce, and tomato. She made French fries. She set up tables in the recreation yard and put out the Coca-Cola in tubs of ice. When the prisoners were released from their work details, they stopped and stared. Sergeant Yamamoto approached cautiously. "What is this?" "This is an American tradition called a barbecue," Emily said. "Please sit, eat, take a break." The prisoners looked at each other uncertainly. Finally, young Kenji, now recovered and walking with a cane, hobbled forward. "May I try?" Emily handed him a hamburger and a Coca-Cola. He bit into the burger and his eyes widened. He took a sip of the cold Coca-Cola and made a sound of pure surprise. It's delicious," he said in Japanese, "and so strange." Other prisoners came forward. Emily and Dorothy served them, showing them how to eat the burgers, explaining what French fries were. The prisoners ate hesitantly at first, then with genuine enjoyment. Corporal Tanaka, the scarred man who had been so hostile, took a long drink of Coca-Cola and actually smiled. "This is very unusual, sweet and bitter at the same time." "That's America," Emily said. "Sweet and bitter, complicated." As the afternoon went on, the atmosphere transformed. The prisoners played volleyball, awkwardly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. They laughed when someone fell or missed the ball. They drank Coca-Cola and talked among themselves, and for a few hours they looked like young men enjoying a summer day instead of prisoners of war. Sergeant Miller pulled Emily aside. "Ma'am, this is something special. I ain't never seen anything like it." "It's just food and recreation, Sergeant." "No, ma'am, it's more than that. It's hope. It's humanity. It's—" He struggled for words. "It's what we're supposed to be fighting for, isn't it? The right to have a cookout on a Saturday afternoon." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes, Sergeant, that's exactly what we're fighting for." That's when Colonel Dawson and Major Harrison showed up. Colonel Dawson stood at the edge of the recreation yard, his face purple with rage. Major Harrison was beside him, looking triumphant. "Lieutenant Chen," Dawson's voice cut through the laughter and conversation. "My office, now." The recreation yard fell silent. The Japanese prisoners stopped eating, stopped playing, and watched with wary eyes. Emily felt her stomach drop, but she kept her voice steady. "Yes, sir," she turned to Sergeant Miller. "Please oversee the rest of the event, Sergeant." "Yes, ma'am." Miller's expression was sympathetic. As Emily walked toward the administration building, she heard Yamamoto say quietly in Japanese, "They will punish her for being kind to us. This is what happens to good people in war." In Dawson's office, the colonel paced like a caged animal while Harrison leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, smirking. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Lieutenant?" Dawson demanded. "Following your orders, sir. You said you wanted measurable results. Productive, cooperative prisoners, that's what I'm delivering. By throwing them a party, by giving them American food and luxuries, by fraternizing with the enemy. By showing them that cooperation is rewarded. By building rapport that leads to better camp security and more productive work. By demonstrating American values through actions, not just words." Harrison pushed off from the wall. "American values? You're giving aid and comfort to men who tortured and killed American soldiers. You're betraying your uniform." "I'm following the Geneva Convention, sir, and I'm using proven psychological principles to manage prisoners effectively." "Psychological principles?" Harrison laughed harshly. "You're a bleeding heart who can't separate your emotions from your duty. This is exactly why women shouldn't be officers. You're too soft, too sentimental." Emily felt something snap inside her. She had endured months of condescension, mockery, and doubt. She had worked twice as hard as any male officer to prove herself. She had followed every rule, exceeded every standard. And still, it wasn't enough. Soft, her voice was quiet but intense. "Sir, I have managed 52 hostile prisoners without a single incident. I have organized productive work details that have saved this camp thousands of dollars in labor costs. I have prevented disease outbreaks through proper medical care. I have created an environment where prisoners cooperate voluntarily instead of requiring constant coercion. And I have done all of this while being undermined, mocked, and sabotaged by officers who decided I would fail before I even started." "How dare you?" Harrison began. "I'm not finished, sir." Emily's eyes blazed. "You call me soft because I treat prisoners humanely, but there's nothing soft about doing what's right when everyone tells you it's wrong. There's nothing weak about showing restraint when you have power. The easy thing, the weak thing, would be to treat those men with cruelty because I'm angry about what Japan did to China, to American soldiers, to the world. But I don't, because I'm strong enough to be better than my anger. The office was dead silent. Dawson had stopped packing and was staring at her. Harrison's face was brick red. "You're relieved of duty," Dawson said finally. "Effective immediately, confined to quarters pending disciplinary review." Emily felt the words like a physical blow, but she kept her expression neutral. "Yes, sir." She saluted and turned to leave. "Wait," Dawson said. Emily turned back. "Who authorized you to spend money on those supplies, the hamburgers and beverages?" "I did, sir. I purchased them with my own money." Dawson blinked. "Your own money?" "Yes, sir. I didn't requisition any camp resources for the event. Everything came from my personal funds." Harrison looked like he had bitten into something sour. That's fraternization, using personal resources to benefit prisoners." "Is there a regulation against that, sir?" Emily asked. "I've read the POW protocols thoroughly. Personal acts of kindness aren't prohibited as long as they don't compromise security or show favoritism to individual prisoners." Dawson sat down heavily. "Get out, Lieutenant. I'll decide what to do with you later." Emily saluted and left. As she walked across the compound to her quarters, she saw the recreation yard. The barbecue had ended. The prisoners were being escorted back to their barracks. But as she watched, young Kenji turned and bowed deeply in her direction. Then Yamamoto did the same. Then all 52 prisoners stopped and bowed toward her. It was a gesture of respect, of gratitude, of recognition. Tears ran down Emily's face as she bowed back. In her quarters, Emily sat on her bunk and waited. She had no idea what would happen next. Court-martial, probably, dishonorable discharge. Her career was over. But she couldn't bring herself to regret what she had done. There was a knock on her door. "Come in," she called. It was Captain Peterson, the camp doctor. "Lieutenant, I heard what happened. I wanted you to know that I submitted a report to Division Medical about your management of the prisoners. I detailed how your insistence on proper medical care prevented several deaths and stopped what could have been a major disease outbreak." "Thank you, doctor. I appreciate that. I also wrote that you showed more courage and integrity than any officer I've served with." He paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry Dawson and Harrison are too stubborn to see what you accomplished." After he left, there was another knock. Sergeant Miller. "Ma'am, the prisoners are asking about you. Yamamoto sent me to tell you that they're refusing to work tomorrow unless you're reinstated." Emily stood up quickly. "Tell them not to do that, Sergeant. Tell them to cooperate. If they resist, it will only make things worse for them and for me." "I told them that, ma'am, but Yamamoto said something in Japanese. I had Private Johnson translate it." Miller pulled out a piece of paper. He said, "Lieutenant Chen showed us honor when she had no obligation to do so. Now we will show her honor regardless of consequences." Emily felt fresh tears coming. "Please, Sergeant, make them understand. I don't want them punished because of me." "I'll do my best, ma'am. But I got to tell you, those men respect you more than they fear punishment. That's real leadership." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She thought about her grandmother, about the stories of war and occupation and survival. She thought about her parents, who had worked so hard to give her opportunities they never had. She thought about all the people who said women couldn't be soldiers, couldn't lead, couldn't make hard decisions. And she thought about 52 Japanese prisoners who had bowed to her in respect. The next morning, there was a commotion outside. Emily looked out her window and saw military vehicles arriving. Officers she didn't recognize were entering the administration building. An hour later, she was summoned to Colonel Dawson's office. When she entered, she found Dawson looking subdued. Harrison was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a silver-haired colonel she didn't know sat behind the desk. His nameplate read, "Colonel James Mitchell, Inspector General's Office." "Lieutenant Chen, please sit down," Mitchell said. Emily sat, her heart pounding. "I'm here conducting a routine inspection of POW facilities in this district," Mitchell said. "But I've also received some interesting reports about this camp. From Captain Peterson, from Sergeant Miller, from several enlisted men, and from Captain Dorothy Walsh. They all tell a very similar story about your work with the Japanese prisoners." Emily said nothing. "I also reviewed your reports and compared them with reports from other POW facilities. Do you know what I found?" No, sir. I found that this camp has the highest prisoner cooperation rate, the lowest incident rate, and the most productive work output of any Japanese POW facility in the continental United States. I found detailed documentation of cost savings, medical success rates, and prisoner attitude changes. I found evidence of exceptional leadership and management. Emily blinked in surprise. I also found evidence that you've been systematically undermined by superior officers who allowed personal prejudice to interfere with their professional judgment. Mitchell's voice hardened. That is unacceptable. Colonel Dawson, sitting to the side, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Lieutenant Chen, I'm recommending you for commendation for outstanding performance of duty. I'm also recommending that your methods be studied and implemented at other facilities. Would you be willing to assist with that? Emily found her voice. Yes, sir, of course. Good, you're being transferred to division headquarters effective next week. You'll help develop new POW management protocols. This is a promotion to captain, by the way. Congratulations. Sir, thank you, sir. Mitchell stood. Thank you, Captain Chen. You've shown us what's possible when we remember that even enemies are human beings. That's a lesson this army needs. The news of Emily's promotion spread quickly through Camp McCoy. The reaction was mixed. Some officers congratulated her warmly, while others gave her cold shoulders and hostile stares. But Emily didn't care. She had 1 week left at the camp, and she was determined to make it count. Her first priority was ensuring a smooth transition. She spent hours training her replacement, a young male lieutenant named Thomas Morrison, who, thankfully, seemed genuinely interested in learning her methods rather than dismissing them. The key is consistency, Emily explained, showing him her detailed logs and schedules. The prisoners need to know what to expect. Arbitrary rules and punishments create resentment. Fair, consistent treatment creates cooperation. Morrison took notes diligently. What about the cultural differences? I don't speak Japanese. You don't need to be fluent. Learn basic phrases. Show respect for their customs. Work with Sergeant Yamamoto. He's essentially the prisoner's liaison. If you treat him with respect, he'll help you manage the others. Major Harrison said Yamamoto can't be trusted, that he's probably manipulating you. Emily smiled slightly. Major Harrison has been transferred to a supply depot in Alaska. I wouldn't put too much stock in his opinions. Morrison grinned. I heard about that. The whole base heard about that. The Inspector General's investigation had indeed resulted in consequences. Harrison was transferred for prejudicial conduct and abuse of authority. Colonel Dawson received a formal reprimand and was being replaced as camp commander. Several other officers who had participated in undermining Emily's work were reassigned. But Emily took no pleasure in their downfall. She had never wanted revenge, just the opportunity to do her job properly. On her second-to-last day at Camp McCoy, Emily requested permission to address the Japanese prisoners one final time. Colonel Mitchell, who was temporarily overseeing the camp during the command transition, granted approval. The prisoners assembled in the recreation yard. Emily stood before them with Sergeant Miller at her side and Lieutenant Morrison observing. I'm being transferred to new duties, Emily said in Japanese. Lieutenant Morrison will take over your management. I expect you to show him the same cooperation you've shown me. Sergeant Yamamoto stepped forward. Lieutenant Chen, the men have asked me to speak for them. We know we are enemies of America. We know we have committed acts in service of our emperor that we cannot undo. But you have shown us that even enemies can be treated with dignity. You have taught us that strength and kindness are not opposites. He paused, then continued. Many of us believed the propaganda we were taught, that Americans are barbarians, that death is preferable to capture, that your nation has no honor. You have proven all of that to be lies, not with words but with actions. Young Kenji stepped forward, limping slightly. You saved my life, Lieutenant, not because you had to, but because you believed I was worth saving. I will never forget that. Corporal Tanaka, the scarred man who had been so hostile at first, spoke next. I hated you when I arrived. You are Chinese, and I was taught to despise Chinese people. You are a woman, and I was taught that women are inferior. You are American, my enemy, but you showed me that hate is a choice, not a destiny. You treated me like a human being when I had forgotten how to be one. One by one, the prisoners spoke. They talked about what Emily's kindness had meant to them, how it had changed their understanding of America of war, of themselves. Finally, Yamamoto said, "We have made something for you, a gift, though we have little to give." He handed Emily a folded piece of cloth. When she unfolded it, she saw it was a beautifully embroidered handkerchief. The prisoners had used thread from their uniforms to create an intricate design, a cherry blossom tree on one side, an American eagle on the other, and in the center, Japanese characters. "What does it say?" Emily asked, though her voice was thick with emotion. "It says honor in all things," Yamamoto translated. "That is what you have taught us, and that is what we will remember." Emily clutched the handkerchief, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, all of you, and please remember the war will end someday. When it does, you'll go home. You'll rebuild your lives, take what you've learned here and use it to build a better Japan. A Japan of honor and peace, not conquest and cruelty." "We will try," Yamamoto said quietly. "Because of you, we will try." That evening, Emily had a final meeting with Colonel Mitchell. "I've been reviewing the broader implications of your work," Mitchell said. "We have tens of thousands of Japanese prisoners across multiple facilities. Most are managed through fear and force. Your approach suggests a better way." "It's not just about being kind, sir," Emily said. "It's about being smart. Hostile prisoners are dangerous and unproductive. Cooperative prisoners can actually contribute. And when the war ends, we want those prisoners to return to Japan with positive impressions of America. That's how you win the peace, not just the war." Mitchell nodded slowly. "You sound like you've thought about this a lot." "My grandmother taught me that wars end, but people remember. She remembered kindness from strangers during the occupation of Shanghai, small acts of humanity that gave her hope. I wanted to give these men that same hope." "Well, you've succeeded. Division wants you to tour other facilities, train officers, develop formal protocols. This is going to be your career for the foreseeable future. How do you feel about that?" Emily thought about the long road ahead. She thought about facing more officers like Harrison who would dismiss her because she was a woman, because she was Chinese, because she believed in treating enemies humanely. But she also thought about Kenji's smile when he tasted his first hamburger. She thought about Tanaka's laugh when he tried Coca-Cola. She thought about 52 men bowing to her in respect. "I feel honored, sir, and ready." On Emily's last day at Camp McCoy, something extraordinary happened. The prisoners requested permission to form an honor guard for her departure. Colonel Mitchell, after some consideration, approved it. As Emily walked to the car that would take her to division headquarters, she found all 52 Japanese prisoners standing at attention in two perfect lines, creating a corridor. As she walked between them, each prisoner bowed deeply. It was a gesture of profound respect in Japanese culture, a recognition of her honor, her character, her humanity. Emily bowed back to each one, tears streaming down her face. Sergeant Miller, who had become her unlikely friend, saluted her as she reached her car. "You changed this place, ma'am. More than that, you changed us. You showed us how to see past our hate." "You did that yourself, Sergeant. I just gave you permission." As the car pulled away, Emily looked back at Camp McCoy. She saw the prisoners still standing at attention, still bowing. She saw Lieutenant Morrison watching with an expression of determination. He would carry on her work. She saw Sergeant Miller wiping his eyes. And she saw the recreation yard, where she had served hamburgers and Coca-Cola, where she had shown enemy soldiers what America really stood for. Captain Dorothy Walsh, who was driving Emily to the train station, glanced at her. "You know you're going to be famous, right? The story's already spreading. The whack officer who changed prisoner management with hamburgers and kindness." Emily laughed through her tears. "That's not quite accurate." "Isn't it? You fed them American food, showed them American culture, and treated them like human beings. And in doing so, you accomplished more than fear and punishment ever could." "I just did my job." "No, you did more than that. You proved that women can lead just as effectively as men, maybe more effectively because we're not afraid to show compassion. You proved that Chinese Americans are just as patriotic as anyone else. You proved that treating enemies with dignity doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong." Emily looked down at the embroidered handkerchief in her hands. "I proved that people can change, that even enemies can find common ground, that even in war, humanity can survive." 6 months later, Emily stood in a conference room at the Pentagon, presenting her POW management protocols to a room full of generals and colonels. The war with Japan had ended 2 months earlier with Japan's surrender. Prisoners were being repatriated. But Emily's work was more important than ever. The question now was how to rebuild relationships with former enemies, how to create lasting peace. The key, Emily explained, pointing to charts showing the success rates of her methods, is remembering that military victories are temporary. How we treat people, friend and enemy, echoes through generations. A general raised his hand. Captain Chen, you're saying we should be kind to our enemies, even after Pearl Harbor, after Bataan, after all the atrocities. I'm saying we should be smart, sir. Cruelty breeds more cruelty. Dignity breeds respect. The prisoners I managed returned to Japan with a different understanding of America. They'll tell their families, their communities, their children what they experienced. That's how you change a nation's culture, one person at a time. After the presentation, several officers approached Emily with questions and comments. Some were skeptical, but many were genuinely interested. One older colonel pulled her aside. Captain, I served in the Pacific. I saw things that made me hate every Japanese soldier. But I also saw what happened when we treated prisoners with cruelty. It made them fight harder, resist more. Your approach makes sense, even if it feels wrong emotionally. That's the challenge, sir. Our emotions want revenge. Our intelligence wants peace. We have to choose which one to follow. You're wise beyond your years, Captain. I learned from my grandmother, sir. She survived the occupation of Shanghai. She taught me that surviving war is one thing. Surviving it with your humanity intact is another. That evening, Emily sat in her small apartment in Washington, D.C., and opened a letter that had arrived that morning. It was from Sergeant Yamamoto, postmarked from Kyoto. Dear Captain Chen, I write to you from my home, which still stands despite the bombing. My wife and children survived the war. I am grateful beyond words. I also write to tell you what I am doing now. I am teaching at a school, helping young people understand what happened during the war and why it must never happen again. I tell them about you, about the American officer who showed me that enemies can still treat each other with honor. Many of the other prisoners from Camp McCoy are doing similar work. Kenji is studying medicine. He wants to save lives instead of taking them. Tanaka is working to rebuild his city. We all carry with us the lessons you taught. You asked us to build a better Japan. We are trying. It is hard work, but we remember the hamburgers and Coca-Cola, the volleyball games, the kindness you showed when you had every reason to show cruelty. Those memories give us hope. Thank you for seeing us as human beings. Thank you for treating us with dignity. Thank you for showing us what America truly stands for. With deepest respect and gratitude. Takeshi Yamamoto. Emily folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box where she kept the embroidered handkerchief and other mementos from her time at Camp McCoy. She thought about how far she had come, from being mocked and underestimated to being respected and sought after for her expertise. She thought about all the people who said women couldn't be effective military officers, that Chinese Americans couldn't be trusted, that kindness was weakness. She had proven them all wrong. Not with anger or revenge, but with patience, intelligence, and unwavering commitment to doing what was right. The next morning, Emily reported to her new assignment, the War Department's Japan Reconstruction Office. She would be helping develop policies for the American occupation of Japan, ensuring that former enemies became future allies. As she walked into the building, she thought about Yamamoto's letter, about Kenji's dream of becoming a doctor, about Tanaka's work rebuilding his city. And she thought about the moment those 52 prisoners tasted hamburgers and Coca-Cola for the first time, their faces full of surprise and wonder. It was such a small thing, a meal, a cold drink, a moment of normalcy in the middle of war. But small things, Emily had learned, could change the world. One hamburger at a time, one person at a time, one act of kindness at a time. That was how you built peace. That was how you honored the fallen. That was how you created a better future. And that was what Emily Chen would spend the rest of her life doing.